Hi. Welcome to the Curiosity Club. It's good to see you again. According to the Israel Defense Forces IDF, on October 7, 2023, local time, Palestinian militants from the Gaza Strip fired over 2,000 rockets into Israel. Additionally, Hamas militants entered southern Israeli territory by land, sea, and air, with some using paragliders, launching an unprecedented surprise attack on Israel. Israel immediately retaliated with what they called Operation Swords of Iron, vowing that Hamas would pay a heavy price for this. Why Hamas chose this time to launch their attacks? From Hamas's perspective, several factors triggered this event. First, marginalization of Palestinians. Against the backdrop of the Abraham Accords, US-led talks between Israel and Saudi Arabia have been gradually progressing, sidelining Palestinians. Second, escalation of violence in the West Bank. There has been ongoing and increasingly violent conflict between extremist Israeli settlers in the West Bank and the local Palestinian population. Third, domestic turmoil in Israel. Israel is currently facing one of the most significant domestic political division in its history. Fourth, attack on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. On September 15, 2020, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain signed a historic peace agreement at the White House in the United States, known as the Abraham Accords. This agreement, through several bilateral provisions, aimed to normalize relations between Arab nations and Israel. However, this bilateral agreement overlooks a just resolution to the Palestinian issue. Currently, Arab countries like the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco have normalized relations with Israel. Recently, the United States has been actively pushing for reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Israel. However, all three parties have put forth complex conditions for such an agreement. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has signaled that he is willing to recognize Israel given it can provide vast economic benefits to Saudi Arabia. Before the Hamas attack, there were reports that Saudi Arabia had informed the White House of its willingness to increase oil production to facilitate the agreement, something the Biden administration has been seeking for 2 years. But Saudi Arabia hopes for U.S. assistance in developing a civilian nuclear program, a point opposed by right-wing members of Netanyahu's coalition and some members of the U.S. Senate. Furthermore, Biden in his recent meeting with Netanyahu stated that any agreement must include land for the Palestinians to establish a viable state, a goal hindered by Netanyahu's expansion of settlements in the West Bank. If Saudi-Israeli relations normalize, it could give the ease for the long-standing confrontation between Israel and other Arab nations. However, Arab world support for Palestine would significantly weaken, and the Arab-Israeli conflict could transform into a sole Palestinian-Israeli conflict, isolating Palestine further. Hamas's recent actions are a message to the international community that Palestinians can no longer tolerate the status quo that favors Israel. Hamas refers to this operation as the Al-Aqsa storm and states that the assault is in response to Israeli desecration of the Al-Aqsa mosque in Jerusalem and the ongoing siege of Gaza. In recent years, violence by extremist Israeli settlers against Palestinian residents in the occupied West Bank has increased significantly. According to reports, there have been over 700 incidents of Israeli settler attacks on Palestinians in 2023, the highest number in record, and more than 400 Palestinians have been forcibly displaced from their homes since 2022. Netanyahu's right-wing government also plans to establish 5,000 new Israeli settlements on Palestinian land, a move that has been condemned by the international community but remains unchecked. In this situation, as Saudi Arabia draws closer to Israel, the frustration and disappointment among Palestinians are clearly on the rise. In order to ensure the unhindered implementation of his policies, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister, pushed for a judicial reform aimed at weakening the authority of the Supreme Court. This sparked widespread protests across the country and exacerbated domestic divisions. Opponents argue that Netanyahu's pursuit of this judicial reform would undermine the democratic checks and balances on power within Israel. Particularly, at a time when Netanyahu faces corruption allegations, it could leave the judiciary lacking the ability to counteract leadership. Some portions of the reform were passed in the Israeli parliament in March and July 2023. It enacted the law that protected a prime minister from being removed from power and prevented the court from declaring government decisions unreasonable. An opinion poll indicates that 56% of the Israeli population is concerned that this judicial reform could escalate domestic conflicts and lead to a civil war. Hamas may perceive that attacking Israel during its current state of internal division is an opportune moment. The Israel-Palestine conflict can be traced back to 1948. That year, the United Nations ended British mandate over the Palestinian territories and partitioned some of the land for the establishment of Israel. This decision sparked protests among Arab nations and Palestinians. In the same year, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq launched a war against Israel, which ultimately ended in failure. In 1967, Israel engaged in the Six-Day War with Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, leading to Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, and the West Bank. This became a key issue in the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Fourth Arab-Israeli War of 1973, also known as the Yom Kippur War, primarily involved Egypt and Syria against Israel. It was the only war in which Arab nations held an advantage and shattered the myth of Israel's invincibility, leading to negotiations between Israel and Egypt. Hamas's choice to launch an attack on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War holds symbolic significance, as they aim to boost their morale and undermine Israel's confidence. At present, Western countries such as the United States and Europe have expressed support for Israel and have stated that Hamas's actions constitute acts of terrorism. Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah in Lebanon have explicitly expressed support for Hamas. The further developments in the conflict will depend on the international community, especially the reactions and actions of other Arab nations. We are hoping the world could be always peaceful. But the constant conflicts and wars keep reminding us that nations only act for their own interests. Okay, that's all for today. See you next time in the Curiosity Club.